with the Green Shoe Foundation, and we're live. I'm so excited. So here we are doing our first ever live podcast, and we got the whole entire team. So you guys wave. We're all coming from different places, different offices, some right next door, some in secret locations, I'm going to say. Let's do some quick introductions. So Teresa, why don't you start us out?
Good morning. I'm Teresa Deck. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm the clinical director here at Green Shoe.
Okay, Steve, you're next to my Brady Bunch box.
Right. I'm Stephen Brinkworth. I'm a licensed clinical worker. I'm one of the therapists here at Green Shoe.
Okay, Rebecca, you're up.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Holt. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm a therapist here at Green Shoe.
Great. And then Roberta.
Hi, I'm Roberta Heath. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am a therapist here at Green Shoe.
Awesome. And last but very not least, Miss Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda Newland. I'm the social media and marketing director here at Green Shoe.
Awesome. Well, hey, if you're joining us live, we really, really appreciate it. Know that Amanda, being our social media network, she's going to be kind of popping back and forth and kind of watching. But today, a lot of you guys have submitted some questions, and we wanted to kind of put this out there and just answer your questions about Green Shoe, about mental health, and anything that you had out there. And first, thank you so much for submitting your questions. We really appreciate this, and we're going to kind of jump right into it. And the first one's kind of a great one to kind of just start the whole conversation. And it is, are mental health and emotional health the same thing? So who wants to start us out? Teresa, you want to start?
Certainly. Mental health has a more global, I think, meaning for us when we think about mental health, because that's about all our processes of our brain and our brain functions and how we think and what we feel and how we act, our behaviors. And so emotional health is more having to do with just our emotions or our feelings. And so we kind of that's kind of a part of our mental health, but it's not the global overall mental health. Now, I don't know if that helped, or somebody else want to say something else that might add a little more to that, the difference in mental health and emotional health.
I think with mental health too, because we think about, when I hear mental health, I do think about the emotional component. Probably part of that's because I'm a therapist, but also with mental health, you think about the engagement we have with our brains, we did some artwork yesterday or crosswords or, but stimulating your brain in intellectual ways as well. So it's not just emotional, there's other parts of that. But I think mental health often gets kind of bunched in with that emotional part of us.
And I know like that term can mean so many different things to different people, and whoever you ask, you're going to get a different explanation too.
Yeah.
I think too a little bit about how different components of the mental health processes impact our emotional health. Let's say lack of sleep or stress. Some of the emotions that may come up may be in varying degrees of intensity based on other things that might be going on with my mental health, lack of sleep or ongoing chronic stress, chronic pain that my brain is trying to make sense of what to do with, while I'm also trying to navigate emotional pieces that are going on for me as an individual.
Yeah. And we have to remember that when we say emotion, it means our feelings. And that's, one of the parts of our mental health.
Yeah, when we talk about mental health, and we're talking about the brain as a whole, and I think when we talk about emotions, we're talking about that part of the brain, that limbic system, that kind of controls our emotions. So globally, yes, mental health, when we're talking about the brain, but we're kind of honing in on a specific part of the brain when we're talking about emotional health.
Yeah, very, very true. So one of the other questions we got that I want to tie into this was, is there a cure for mental illness? And they use the word cure.
Well, I laugh because we had talked about this. I think with emotional wellness, it's like anything else. I mean, I always kind of use the metaphor of physical health. So like if I'm diagnosed with diabetes, there's not necessarily a cure for that, but I can do everything in my day to maintain healthy levels, to have a healthy lifestyle. And I think it's the same thing with any kind of emotional, there's never a finish line that we're like, woo, never have to do that again, over. It's a day in. And so to use that word cure, I wouldn't say that, but just like with our physical health, even if we were cured from something, it doesn't mean it's never going to come up again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not, I mean, there's not a magic pill. There's not a magic Alice in Wonderland potion, to drink, or one book that's going to help you. But, if I change that term, just, can I heal? I think the answer, y'all start doing this. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely, there are things you can do to heal. And like you said, Rebecca, to really help that daily journey of working, and having that joyfulness.
There will always be things that activate us, that bring, unless we have like a Men in Black wand and can just forget everything from the past, which we don't want to do, there's always going to be things that come up in our lives. And so it's maintaining that daily awareness, that daily lifestyle of having healthy emotional, mental health.
And this makes me think about something. And Teresa, you were talking about this the other day with a particular group about how painful it was for that group to do their work, but what transformation and joy came out of that pain. And so the healing process may not be the most easiest thing in the world, but it's the joy that comes out on the other side and the healing.
Absolutely. There's a lot of pain involved in, if you experience any kind of childhood relational trauma, which is what we deal with at Green Shoe. We all know that it created pain in our childhood and how we adapted to that pain, and having to go back. And so how we adapt is either by saying it didn't happen, or trying to forget it happened, or trying to numb it, or whatever we try to do to fix what happened to us so we can feel like we have emotional health and well-being right now. Is if it's not healthy, then having to go back and look at what we did experience and how to identify what that is, to work through and process it, which is painful because it's a grieving process about what I didn't get or what I did get that was traumatic, and how that impacts me. So there's a grieving, sad process in order to get to the part where I am I feel like I'm healed and healthy and well now. But that process, it's a long, maybe not a long process, but it's a process that's difficult and can be painful. But as we talk about, pain creates healing, growth, and awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the gifts, or several of the gifts that emotion, brings us.
There's a piece that I think about too with what you were just sharing, Teresa, that is also somewhat of a natural self-protection component of that healing process, where we avoid some of that pain in different ways. And even in looking at the 5 stages of grief, 2 of those are about not accepting what's happened, in denial, or I'm bargaining. And there's a natural process of me to try and avoid some of that pain to survive, but for us to actually process and heal from it, we've got to get in touch with it. We've got to allow ourselves to feel and work through what we need to move forward. And that in getting in touch with it doesn't mean that I'm going to get stuck in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like what I'm glad you said, Stephanie, earlier about the journey. And that kind of ties into what Steve is saying. When we're on our healing journey, sometimes we like to try to take shortcuts or detours.
Sure.
Those quick fixes that we think are going to work, but that just prolongs our healing. It prolongs that and keeps us from getting what we need. And it makes things harder for us sometimes. And so when we move through that avoidance and we move past that avoidance and into that acceptance part of us, that, okay, it's time to stop avoiding and start accepting and going through my healing, then we can, it may take a long time, it could take years, but as long as you're still moving toward that healing, that's what'll help.
Yeah, no, great points. Okay, so one question we got, and it's actually something that it's a question we've kind of got a bunch. We've done actually several podcasts on this, and I'm going to be pulling in Amanda now, as kind of our social media expert. But this individual asked or stated, I recently took a break from social media. How do I not become stressed or overwhelmed with my feed when I decide to reactivate my accounts?
So my initial answer to this question is always purge. It is my favorite word. Purge your social media. Just when you're scrolling, if something does not make you feel positive internally, you can unfollow, unfriend, unlike, and that goes away. So that is probably the simplest answer. But to kind of go a little bit more in depth with that answer, I did have friends and family deactivate their accounts recently. And so naturally I was worried. So I called them, but also wanted to do a little bit of research like, hey, why did you deactivate your account? But the common denominator was we internally compare our behind the scenes with everyone else's highlight reel. And I know we've touched on the highlight reel before, but a highlight reel, just like sports, is the best and brightest moments. Social media is our highlight reel. It's when we put up our wins, when we look great, or when we're out celebrating with family and friends. So you need to ask yourself when you're posting this, are you seeking social currency? Social currency being likes, follows, and shares to determine your self-worth? Or are you putting this up that is genuinely authentic, where you're not concerned about others determining your value? So you have to affirm yourself and know that you are inherently worthy no matter what your social currency is.
Mm-hmm. Which is great, because that's, one of the core issues with our self-esteem.
Mhm.
And like I said, it's something too that I know, we're on social media, and we, obviously that's something we push both with Facebook and Instagram. And several months ago, Rebecca, you kind of started a Instagram for us. And the goal of that was to spread positivity, being authentic, but trying to make sure we're putting that positive outlet out there for people to follow. Because you're right, Amanda, we can choose, who do we want to follow? What do we want to, put into our feeds, which ultimately is putting into ourselves. I know that. And in order to do that, there's got to be those positive outlets out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah. And just a side note, we're going to change Rebecca's handle to the Tanya Tucker Show because she takes over. We don't know Rebecca. It's all about Tanya.
Yeah.
I have to say, I do want to give credit where credit's due, but Amanda's a huge part of that, that platform and encouraging that and, making it look beautiful and all those things. So just want to make sure.
As much as I love compliments. Thank you.
Well, and Rebecca, it's been a lot for you to put yourself out there, because we're not putting yourself out there for the highlight reels. You're doing this to be authentic. So, what has this experience kind of been like for you starting out?
Well, I mean, I don't know. You can kind of stump me with that question.
That was not what we practiced, I promise.
Yeah. I mean, it's,
Rapid fire.
It's a way to share professional thoughts and connect with others. It's an experience certainly to get the Green Shoe name and kind of what we're about out there. So it's neat to connect with people and kind of have that personal touch with it. And so it's been, Amanda, certainly we've had fun kind of thinking of some things to put out there and some ideas. And so I've enjoyed doing that and being able to connect with people.
Yeah. And I know we said this on our last podcast, but I think one of the greatest elements about it is when someone messages in, Rebecca actually takes that message. And even with Green Shoe, like obviously there's a human element there. But with Rebecca, she takes time and wants to yes, let's talk about this, or here's a resource. She's very involved. So I think that's the greatest element there.
And I think that's great. Now, I will tell you, if you message in about 2 a.m., you're going to get the rowboat or the robot message of, hey, we're out of pocket. We'll get back with you. But from about 6 a.m. to, I don't know, I'm going to disconnect about 10.
Yeah.
You're going to get one of us that's
Yeah.
actually, responding. And that's a great thing. Yeah. When you call in, when you email, it's us,
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
connecting with.
Social media may never sleep, but we do.
We do. Most of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
All right. Okay. So I want to switch gears again. This question came in and it says, how do you stay positive in a toxic work environment?
Hmm.
Had this discussion a little bit yesterday, and there are lots of ways that we handle our work environment and differently than we handle our home environment. But if you have a toxic work environment or home environment, what we were talking about was to look at yourself and where are you in the mix in that environment. And the only thing that you can control is is your response about how you respond to what's going on. But you also do have a right to address what's going on, to address the toxicity. And so that is, I think, hugely important for you to be able to be honest and open. Can you do that with your supervisor, your boss, or whoever it is that say, hey, this is a problem. This is an issue. There's a lot of toxic stuff going on. And so I need to share with you what that's like for me. And so being able to go and share about what's happening, I think is hugely important, and being able to address it.
Right. And one of the things we talked about, and Steve, maybe you can address this, is maybe going back and looking at what it was like growing up. Did you experience a toxic environment then? Because that's going to affect how you deal with the toxic environment now.
Absolutely. And that's something too, that in our family of origin, we're going to learn how to do relationships. That's what we look at Green Shoe. And in thinking about those toxic environments, sometimes if I grew up in that toxic environment, I may have learned, there's a slide we use on Monday with a little dog cartoon, that this is fine. I may have learned that this environment is fine, that it's out of my control, it's going to continue, and I just have to go along with it. And so in a work environment, if that same pattern shows up, what comes up inside of us? Is that something that I've learned that I just have to endure, that I don't have to say, and it just continues? That I learned that it was safe to leave? That I learned that when things are stressful, I need to really look at that self-care and make some time for me to not suppress what's been going on, but to release it, whether that's getting with a therapist through and hashing those pieces out about what it's bringing up for us, or really looking at some physical action, going out and taking a walk, involved in something that's got physical activity that allows for that bilateral stimulation for us to release some of that stress and toxicity that we've held on to during the day. So there's pieces at work that we can do. There's pieces in our home life that we can do, but absolutely our past is gonna be activated when we've got that toxic stress going on.
Yeah. And there's a piece of this question that I know when I asked it to you guys, earlier, Roberta made this comment, but the thing is, I've kind of spent some time thinking about it, and it was about the word positivity. And Roberta, you were like, sometimes people that force positivity, that's actually not helpful. And I thought back to a former life where, because I'm such a people pleaser, that was me. I would stay in a toxic work environment and push that positivity because, I'm trying to please everybody. And, you were absolutely right. That staying positive sometimes perpetuates a toxic environment.
Yeah. When we're exhibiting toxic positivity and not living in reality, then we're contributing to that toxic environment. So we have to be able to be real and authentic about what's going on.
Yeah.
That's really important.
How many
Right.
individuals do we see coming in the week that said, I couldn't be angry, I couldn't be sad. My mom or dad, it had to be perfect. We had to look like the perfect family. And so we learned to not be real and authentic. So being able to address, say, that little girl or little boy, that big girl or little boy needs to be able to say, this is toxic, this is not healthy. How can we resolve this conflict? Because some of us want to avoid conflict at any cost, and that's not healthy. We need to be able to address conflict in a healthy way. So I think that's really important for us to say, oh, I have to be happy about this no matter how bad, how many fires,
Oh,
the
yeah.
house is crashing down, and this is fine. Like Steve said, no, this is not.
We're all
fine.
shaking our head. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I think too, as a leader, and if you're that role in your work environment, it is your responsibility to not do that. Know that work environments, sometimes conflict is actually good. It helps you work through things. Things are not always positive. And recognizing that, I think we can actually help you grow as a team in having that. So.
Yes, absolutely.
And so Teresa, you kind of brought up the word conflict, and that's actually in one of our questions that I want to get to in a minute, but it really ties into, we had so many questions that the answer is boundaries. So I want to talk about boundaries because again, we had questions about, how do I deal with conflict? How do I deal with an abusive family member? Or a family member who's being, and I don't know if inappropriate is the right word, offensive. That's the word I'm looking for, And so as we look at a lot of these questions, they all kind of fell into that boundary category. So let's kind of talk about that, especially when we're having to set boundaries in some of those very difficult situations.
Rebecca is our guru on boundaries on Monday. She teaches the boundaries. She talks also about the talking listening boundary, which is so helpful and so appropriate in many cases. And so not in any case, all the cases, being able to share what you think and what you feel with others and understanding that they have a right to their thoughts and feelings too. But Rebecca, you want to talk about boundaries a minute?
Yeah, well, I think that protection and containment is the first thing we talk about when we talk about boundaries, because I think that we forget there's two parts to boundaries. I can protect myself from you, but I'm also going to contain myself so that I don't offend or overwhelm you. That goes physically, emotionally, sexually in those boundaries. And so, sometimes there's situations where we have to have a boundary that says, you're not safe for me to be around, or it's not safe to have a relationship with you. And so there's that, I've got to physically remove myself. But there's times in relationships, maybe someone's experiencing pain or frustration. Here recently, hi husband, if you're watching, he's probably watching right now. But we had and I'm sharing about a conversation we had, hope that's okay wherever you are, but we had a conversation and it was, he felt like there were some things wrong with something and I kept feeling like I had to fix it. Like every time he would kind of list something that wasn't right, I felt like I had to fix it. And I said to him, I've got to readjust my boundaries because I'm so overwhelmed hearing this information because I'm taking it on like I have to take care of it. But what I needed to do is to set a boundary and say, I'm here to help, but I don't have to take on the responsibility for your thoughts, feelings, actions, things like that. And that's just a small example. But I think oftentimes, especially in those close relationships, those boundaries it kind of becomes a gray area. Of like, I don't know where to step back. I don't know what to do, and so sometimes I just say to myself, I'm not responsible for your actions or your thoughts or your feelings. But there may be times I want to sit here with you and be present. There may be times that like, I've got to remove myself from it because it's not safe for me. And so boundaries they're tricky. And I think the other thing, I always say this whenever I teach about boundaries, you have to learn boundaries and you either see that modeled when you're growing up or someone talks to you about it. And most of the time that's not what happens. So I think that's one of the reasons boundaries can be so puzzling, you
Mhm.
know, because I'm 30 years old trying to figure out what a boundary is.
Right. And it's practice, practice, practice. Because again, we're not going to be perfect at it, you know, and I find it so much easier to set a boundary with a stranger, you know, than with somebody that I love and care about. You know, there's a lot more feelings involved. And one thing too, I want to point out to everyone, it's not just that we can talk about boundaries because we've read about it, studied about it, been trained on it, have only talked about it for, you know, 20 million years. This is something that I know that we talk about daily in our own lives, the struggle of it. And I know we laugh about it and joke about it, but you know, it's hard. But the one thing I also hear when we talk about is how rewarding it is in those relationships when you do set boundaries and some of the conversations it has opened up, you know, with people we're close with.
You know, having those boundaries set in place, they don't always look the same in every relationship.
Mm.
As both people in that relationship have those boundaries set, the other beautiful thing is it gives both people a safe place to exist and share their reality with each other. We
Mhm.
have a right to be in this relationship and we both have a right to those boundaries. Those does not mean I'm putting a wall up and keeping you at a distance, but I'm taking on stuff that's not mine.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, Steve, as I hear you talk about that, just follow up from that, you know, setting that boundary, you know, I can't take responsibility. My husband was like, you know, thank you for telling me that, you know, it was like, I want to respect that because I didn't realize that's where you were going. And so it was like, yeah, it helped us connect because he was able to understand my reality and why that was so overwhelming for me, where maybe he wouldn't have before.
Well, sure. And we got a question in this morning that was directly related to that. It was about, actually, it's a mom that's asking about a relationship with a son-in-law who is back in the home with her daughter, and there's some concern. And how does she set boundaries with him? And in talking about this, by setting boundaries with him, not only are you, I mean, protecting yourself, but you're also modeling for your daughter too, the appropriate boundary. And so when we do that, you know, we're all, you know, we're showing other people, and especially, you know, we talk about this in our parenting class, you know, how, you know, we have that responsibility to model for our children and for others what those boundaries are.
There's a question that comes up in my mind just as I'm listening to you share that about somebody that's come back into our life that we're having to set boundaries with. Who is it that I'm setting boundaries for? Am I setting boundaries for myself, or am I trying to set boundaries to protect another person in my life? And those can look really different, where that may be a boundary I'm setting out of my own stuff that's intruding on another person's boundary and their ability to set those boundaries appropriately in their relationship too. So just being mindful of our own past. And sometimes in our history, there may have been people who were enmeshed that didn't have those appropriate boundaries and may have stepped in to try and do things for us or set boundaries in our life that were not our own. Something to be aware of, because yeah, we can absolutely set those and model that for other people, that I'm not going to allow this to be a part of my life. You can live your life in a way that you choose, but these are the things that are important to me. These are the values and pieces that I'm gonna stick to make sure that I have healthiness in my life and my relationship.
Yeah. So is there a thing as too much boundaries?
Well, we call
Walls.
too much, too much boundaries is called walls.
Yeah.
Where, and that prevents individuals from having what we call intimacy, is being able to share who they are, share their reality with other people. Because if there's a wall between me and someone I'm trying to have a relationship with, and that wall is a metaphorical wall, it may be a wall of anger. If I'm angry and I shut down, then I can't communicate, and I can't be in a relationship with that person. So those walls prevent intimacy, prevent connection, prevent relationships with other people. They protect you. Nobody's going to get in, but they also prevent you from being relational with other
Mhm.
people. So walls is the opposite of a healthy boundary. And again, walls of fear, anger, shame, silence, well, that.
Humor, walls of
Oh,
humor,
yes, yes,
Yeah.
let's just make a joke about it.
walls of
Right.
caregiving,
Wall of
Mhm.
words.
Yes,
words.
yes, yes.
And
There's
also we
there's a
see,
lot of walls that we can use, and some not even realize that that's a wall.
yeah,
Absolutely. Because it's so familiar, because that's what we did. That's what we learned as a child to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
And so, and we still continue to do that because we've not recognized that we don't know the difference in walls. We don't know what a healthy boundary looks like. We don't know that we should protect, we need to protect and contain ourselves. So it's.
And I don't know that people connect that to, oh, I've got too many boundaries. You know, sometimes it's easier to teach someone you need boundaries because they're boundaryless, but those that have those walls up, they don't realize, oh, wait, that's a problem, you know, with that. All right, guys. Hey, we've done our 30 minutes. So, and we've gone through the questions. At least I hope we kind of went through everything. Again, talking about the different topics and things that came in, it was great, and we really appreciate everyone's questions. Any last statements, comments?
Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks
Yes.
for joining us.
I know, I really appreciate it. Hey, we've got some great podcasts are still coming up. I want to give a shout out to the gentleman with Casa Colina. They are our next podcast and talking about, again, continuing the conversation on men's mental health. And really looking forward to it. If you know the awesome Eddie Fisher, you don't want to miss this one. A great personality, and he gives awesome pizza recipes. So just cannot wait. So you guys go have a great weekend. If you need us, we're here. So reach out again, the Facebook, Instagram, our website, greenshoe.org, or just email us info@greenshoe.org. That easy, and you will get one of us if you need anything. So again, have a great weekend, and we look forward to talking some more.